Hey, hello, hi, it's me, KJ Speaks, and you're listening to Seated with the Word with me, KJ Speaks, on the station that heaven listens to, Viva Radio.fm. So, to anybody new here, welcome back. This is Seated with the Word. And if since you're new, and if you're not new, I'm going to explain what this space is. It's basically a space where we get to read scripture. We read it slowly and we read it thoroughly. We sit in the tension of what we're learning. We grapple with the text with questions, and none of us is required to have it all figured out. I will not have all the answers for you today. I'm simply sitting here reading, asking questions, and listening with you. So today we're going to be diving into John chapter 9, and I'm going to tell you right from the top that this is one of my favorite chapters in the entire gospel because it's kind of funny, but it's also a very real encounter of what it's like to be stuck in a place of suffering for a long time and someone offering you complete safety and peace, and you being like, no, 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 like this situation sucks, right? It's funny, the way that real life can be funny, in the way that truth sometimes has a dry wit to it that you don't yet notice until the third or fourth time you read it or you recall that story and you're like, haha, this is funny now. So, what are we going to be talking about in John chapter 9? Well, there's a man who has been blind from birth, and he receives his sight. Just to spoil the story. And then for the next 30 something verses, everyone around him tries to talk him out of what just happened, right? They're like, hey, like that didn't happen, or it didn't happen the way you remember it. And his neighbors, people around him, are not sure that it's the same man. Like they're like, no way, right? And his parents are too afraid to say anything, as we'll go through in this story. And the Pharisees interrogate him, not once, but twice. They call on his parents for backup, they question his theology, and they question his character. And more importantly, they question Jesus' character. And they throw everything they have at this man because he was blind and now he can see. And he just keeps saying the exact same thing to them. I was blind and now I can see. And that's the gist of chapter 9. And we figure out the rest of the story for ourselves as we dive into this. So, one thing I want to note also is that this chapter will be like a masterclass on what it looks like to hold on to your testimony, even when institutions, even when your family and your friends are telling you to let it go. And it'll end with a question about sight and blindness that, quite frankly, um, turns the entire conversation upside down. And so I'm excited to get started. So let's open our books to John chapter 9. We can get a relationship with Christ. That's it. Like, not even Jesus is trying to stand in the way. He's like, yeah, okay, do this thing. He don't even tell the man to go tell your story. The man naturally tells his story, and people are curious, confused, and a ruckus gets caused after all of this. And so let's go ahead and move on to the later verses, 13 through 24. So moving on to the next section, it's basically what I'm calling the interrogation. And I'm going to read verses 13 and beyond. Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it. So he told them, he put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man, Jesus, is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath. Others said, but how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded, what's your opinion about this man who healed you? The man replied, I think he must be a prophet. The Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see, so they called to his parents. They asked him, "Is this your son? Was he blind? Was he born blind? And if so, how can he see now?" His parents replied, "We know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He is old enough to speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said, "He is old enough, ask him." So, for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him, "God should get the glory for this because we know this man, Jesus, is a sinner." "I don't know whether he is a sinner," the man replied, "but I know this. I was blind and now I can see." "But what did he do?" they asked. "How did he heal you?" "Look," the man explained. "I told you once. Didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they cursed him and said, "You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from." "Why, that's very strange," the man replied. "He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, but he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. If this man were not from God, he couldn't have done it." "You were born a total sinner," they answered. "Are you trying to teach us?" And then they threw him out of the synagogue. So, the first theological conclusion we have to come to is that he has been removed from the synagogue, right? And I gave you context before about how, like, that's huge, right? That's like being canceled in today's culture. And the leaders, as you just heard us read, have decided that this whole thing must be fraud, right? They go to deep lengths to call his parents, and then his parents even confirm, "Yeah, that's our son, and he was born blind." And then they did something very human and very understandable, and very painful to read at that time, right? They basically say, like, "We don't want any smoke whatsoever. So, like, we're going to tell you facts. That's our son. He was born blind, but that's all we know. And if you want to know anything else, you should ask him because he's a grown man." Because they don't want to end up like how their son ends up getting thrown out of the synagogue, right? Like, there's true fear of the Pharisees, who are the leaders of Judaism at this time, and they knew the consequences if they said, "Yeah, Jesus the Messiah did this," right? And the man himself, if you notice, he is unafraid to say, "Obviously, this man is from God, because if he wasn't, he wouldn't be able to do these things. So why do y'all even keep bothering me about it? You keep asking me over and over and over again, and I keep telling you the same thing." He's not letting up on his story. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this is like the epitome of what it looks like to be challenged by people to tell you that your testimony isn't your testimony, and that your encounter with God is not your encounter with God, and like that you don't know God. And it's like this man standing 10 toes down, and he's saying, "I don't care about your interrogation. I know what happened. I know I was blind. I know mud was put on my eyes. I know when I washed it off, it was gone. So whatever you all have to say about this man, Jesus, it can't be true. He must be from God. He must not be a sinner." And so I find that to be one of the most beautiful things in the gospel, because he doesn't sit there to argue theology. He doesn't even debate the law. He just simply states over and over and over again. And more clearly, he's like, if he's a sinner or not, I don't know. But the only thing that I do know is that I was blind and now I can see. So, um, he is not claiming to have, resolve the theological question or battle or debate that they're all wrestling over and trying to understand in the moment. He's just simply pointing back to the miracle. And he's not claiming to understand everything about who Jesus is either. He's claiming that the one thing that no one can take away from him is his own experience. I was blind and now I can see. That is not at all a contentious thing, right? You can't argue with that. It's just a fact. And the fact that they're interrogating him, as long as they are, doesn't change that the miracle happened to him. And the Pharisees continue to press and press and press. And eventually we get to a place where Jesus calls out spiritual blindness because there's so much unrest amongst the Pharisees about Jesus doing something on the Sabbath and whether or not it was real, right? They have so many questions. They're constantly challenging Jesus, who he is, and his authority. And so let's move on to the last section because it's super powerful. And it's something that like you all should wrestle with, right? Like if this is you, like why do you need to hear over and over again an encounter of who Christ is or someone's testimony story? Why is it so unbelievable to you? I reckon that it has a lot to do with your unbelief and the lack of faith that you have. And maybe your allegiance or loyalty to a different way of thinking, like the Pharisees. They're like, no, we're disciples of Moses, and we know for sure God spoke to Moses. How y'all know for sure he spoke to Moses? Y'all wasn't even around. He did speak to Moses, but still, it's just like for that to be an argument. It's like, actually, you don't know for sure. You inherited this from your family and you believe it so strongly and so deeply. And here comes this man telling you that, like, he is also from God. So let's go ahead and read verses 35 through 41 to close this chapter. In my book, it's titled Spiritual Blindness. Verse 35 reads, when Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of Man? The man answered, who is he, sir? I want to believe in him. You have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Yes, Lord, I believe, the man said, and he worshiped Jesus. Then Jesus told him, I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind. Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked, are you saying we're blind? If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty. Jesus replied, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see. But what we just read was so good because it stands as a reversal of the blind man's encounter, both literally and spiritually. The Pharisees who can see perfectly well are the ones who are actually blind, not to the light, but to what is right in front of them. And the reason their blindness is more serious is that they are claiming that they can see. They are claiming expertise. They are claiming the authority to basically tell people who is from God and who is not. And that claim is what locks them in their blindness. You cannot be healed of a condition you are insisting you do not have, is what Jesus is trying to say. And it's just so good. And so some questions I want to leave you with, even though we asked some throughout, is going to be really good. So take your time with these, journal them, carry them with you, bring them to someone that you trust this week, or message me. So we have the disciples asking, who sinned such that this man is blind? And Jesus refused the question and reframed it entirely. Question for you is there a situation in your own life, a suffering, a loss, a limitation, where you have been asking the backwards looking question of whose fault is it, when the more useful question might be, what is God about to do through this? Okay. Another question I have is thinking about the man's neighbors, right? They were not sure if he was even the same person that he was after he was healed. Have you ever experienced a change in yourself that people around you struggle to receive or believe? I know I have. And if so, like, what did it feel like to hold on to what you knew about yourself when others were unsure? Right? And how do you resist the urge to fight back? And then you have the man's parents who refuse to speak because they're afraid of being put out of the synagogue. They sacrifice their son's moment to protect their own standard. Is there a place in your life right now where fear of institution or social clout is keeping you from saying what you know to be true? And if so, what is that costing you? And last is something that the blind man who was once blind now can see, right? He anchors everything in his own direct experience, not theology, not an argument, not someone else's testimony. And so my question is, what is your one thing? What do you know from your own experience that no interrogation, no one coming against you can take from you? Because that's powerful. So hold on to that. And then lastly, we see the Pharisees arguing with him, and then they expel him out of the synagogue. And so he's punished in isolation from his community and the institution. Have you ever been on that side or part of a system that expelled someone rather than reconsidering the system's own position? And if so, what would you do different? And then we have Jesus claiming that the people who can see remain blind. And so I ask you, where in your life have you felt the most confident that you already understand something clearly, and there could actually be something there that's like keeping you from actually seeing God fully? So, in closing, I'm going to come back to one more time before we close. Is this man's journey in the chapter, because it's truly remarkable. I don't think we honor it enough when we treat this as just a healing story. This is a journey of revelation, right? Like, this man gets mud put on his eyes, instructions to follow. He goes to wash it, and he comes back seeing. And then the real trial really begins. And that's where the root of the story is. Not the blindness. It's what happens after the healing. It's what happens after his community questions him if he's even the same person. And his parents abandon him to protect themselves. And then the most powerful religious institution in the world at this time interrogates him not once, but twice, and tries to tell him that what he experienced did not happen, that what he said happened simply is not true. And the person who did it is yet another sinner. So they're discounting and discrediting everything. And he just keeps saying, I was blind and now I see. Because that is simply what happened. That's not him working out theology. He holds on to his testimony without having all the answers. He defends Jesus without yet knowing Jesus' full identity. He gets better at the argument each time he is faced with interrogation or someone being away from trying to put him out of that. And he's not even being coached through these testimonies, but each time it's teaching us something. It's teaching us that someone else cannot take your personal experience away. And when Jesus finds him, not the other way around, Jesus here, he was thrown out, and he goes looking for him and asks him the question that moves from testimony holder to worshiper. And it is, do you believe in the Son of Man? He did not need to resolve every theological question and things that people had thrown in his face before he had gotten there. He just needed to hold on to the one thing he knew until the moment that he came into contact with Jesus. And that one thing is that I do know I was blind, but now I see. This week, I asked to carry with you that one thing. What do you do from having your own experience and encounter with God such that no one can interrogate you or take it away from you? And understand that, like, you don't have to be afraid of man because God has conquered the world. So I'm asking you to anchor that and have that keep you rooted in the conversation of your relationship with Christ so you can be unwavered. And remember, you don't need to have all the answers. You just need that one thing to hold on to. Okay, guys, that's about all we have for tonight. But stick around for the replay at 10 p.m. And also keep it locked for NYC's Chills replay with DJ Flores coming up at 9 p.m. Signing off from Chicago, it's KJ Speaks. Bye.